All right, my name is Rich Schmidt. We're here with Sam Ecenia. It's July 1st, 2024. We're at Antiquum Farm outside Junction City. Sam, thank you so much for joining us today. First question, as you know, why wine?
Why wine? For me, my introduction into wine was early on. I grew up in Tallahassee, Florida, and my dad was a very passionate about wine. And this is in a place where there weren't many wine shops. There's not many vineyards, all that sort of thing. So he really just digested as much wine literature and magazines and the things coming from wine writers to explore wine. And it didn't, there was always wine on the table at dinner, but it didn't really click with me. It wasn't like I immediately followed his passion for it. I would say for me, it came through the work. The passion followed the work. So for me, it was once I actually started working harvest that my journey and interest and curiosity into wine really began to blossom. So, and why wine? Because wine's great.
It is great. So tell us a little bit about kind of life. You mentioned growing up in Tallahassee. Tell me about your early life and heading off into adulthood.
Yeah, so grew up in Tallahassee, Florida, the Panhandle, and yeah, I was an active kid. I was always running around, and my dad was a lawyer. My mom was an artist, but I felt like they always supported me exploring as many different avenues as I, chose to, and that led me to just spending a lot of time outdoors, trying a few different jobs early on, but never really like coaxed into being a lawyer or which I would have been a terrible lawyer, or a doctor, any conventional paths. They were just supportive and wanted me to figure out what I wanted to do for myself. So when I was ready to leave Florida, which I was at 18, I loved going back, but I was certainly ready to explore the West and check things out. So I ended up at the University of Colorado at Boulder, initially studying philosophy. And that was definitely my parents being like, whatever you want to study, go for it. And a couple years into it, I was asking big questions and not coming up with answers and starting to be like, well, I feel like I really need to learn something tangible here. So I switched to geology, and so I ended up majoring in geology, minoring in philosophy, with actually an emphasis on glaciology and climate change. I was really fascinated, one, by mountains, glaciology, all those sorts of things, but also it was the most visceral, persuasive view of how the climate was changing on Earth, where you'd see these enormous calving events of glaciers, the receding of the ice caps. I mean, it was all very powerful, and a lot of that research was being done at the University of Colorado. So ended up right after graduating going and being a part of a PhD student who was studying these glacial lakes in Nepal. So we went out to Nepal for 6 weeks, and we were studying how these lakes form on the glaciers, and they're interconnected through these channels, and they'll burst and break and move, from one day to another lake will pop up and one will disappear. So she was sort of mapping, trying to understand how that interaction is happening on the glaciers. So we were up there like a couple valleys over from Everest, and it was an amazing place to go, and we were doing fun. We were releasing rubber duckies in some of the lakes, of course retrieving all of them, but like doing some fundraising stuff for that, and I was just there schlepping gear and trying to assist in that. So but after that I wasn't sure I wanted to go down geology's path, because a lot of the people who I graduated with, went towards either research, oil, or mining, and none of those really satisfied me or excited me. So I thought, okay, I'll just, work for a little while and see where my path leads me. And so I went through actually doing seasonal work for Outward Bound, which is a kind of character development slash outdoor adventure kind of operation. And that actually started in Oregon. So that was my first experience to Oregon. We were based in Redmond. And I remember coming out to Oregon and ending up in Redmond in the high desert. And I was like, this is Oregon? Like I had no idea the rain shadow effect and how, drastic that was. But it was an amazing job full of amazing people, and taking kids, meeting them at the airport, taking their phones away, giving them the equipment that they need, and then you're a week on the Deschutes River, and then 2 to 3 weeks backpacking through the Central Cascades, and seeing them become self-sufficient, cooking their own meals, learning how to navigate maps, like a lot of individual growth, and just a really, really powerful experience each trip that really stuck with me. And it's a leadership, character building organization where integrity, excellence, self-reliance, all those sort of things are really what you're trying to drive home. The environment of outdoor adventures are just an avenue to get there. And so that's what drew me out here, and that's somehow kind of led to wine too, because that was seasonal work, that was summer. And really, I worked my first harvest because I came off of these outward bound trips and was like, I need to keep working something else seasonal. And my father suggested, he's like, why don't you work a wine harvest? Anybody will hire some green people to drag hoses and learn from the bottom up. So that's in 2013 that led me to Napa Valley to work for Hourglass Winery.
What did you think about the work you'd be doing before you got there? What were your expectations?
I guess I didn't know. I think when I interviewed for the job, they laid out that it's kind of manual labor, and it's physical, and it's quick, and all-encompassing, time, full commitment, all that, and then it's done. It's like a wave, right? And I was lucky enough to be the only intern there, so that was really fortunate. So it was just the assistant winemaker really taking me under the wing. His name's Justin Carr, and he was a great first mentor, just to really thoroughly explain things and take his time with me. So yeah, really helpful.
So tell me about the first year.
Yeah, the first harvest was awesome. It was underneath Tony Biaggi, who is one of the bigger consultant winemakers in Napa. We were there at this place, Hourglass, very small, sort of, focused on Bordeaux varieties. And I was psyched. I was showing up early. They were happy that I was there early each day, and eager and green, and didn't come in, thinking I knew everything. And I was just a sponge. And it was a great harvest. Everything went very smoothly. It was a relatively mellow harvest, I think, given the amount of fruit we were working with. They were very serious about the wines, but I remember there was a pool on the property, and some days we'd be done at 5 p.m. and we'd be jumping in the pool, and I was like, harvest is not that bad. Like, harvest is great. Later on to learn that that's not always the case. But yeah, it was relatively short and sweet, but that also led to Justin's, I told him I wanted to travel, and he had worked at Craggy Range in New Zealand, which they hire 12 interns all around the world. They had an American winemaker early on, and that kind of spurred into the whole harvest hopping, jumping around, and led me to New Zealand after that. Yeah.
So what about that first harvest made you want to do that, made you want to keep going?
I think at that point I wasn't totally sure that it was the path for me, and I think it was going to New Zealand after that solidified it, because I was then living in a house with a bunch of young people who, wine was their passion and their career, and then we started tasting bottles and sharing wines from Spain and around the world, and I think that I started to see more the community aspect once I jumped into New Zealand, and then just continued to sort of hone my skills and learn more about what's happening in the winery. And then it was actually after that that I really committed. Well, I actually came after New Zealand, came to Oregon, worked at Pinner Ash, had a great experience there, and they didn't have a position for me, and so that was kind of the turning point where I was, I went back to Outward Bound for the summer, and I was just hopping around a lot, and I decided I want to see the year-round process of wine. Like, these harvests are great, but I still feel like there's this huge gap that I'm not getting and I don't understand, and a lot of questions. And at that point, I was a little tired from hopping around and the anxiety of not knowing what's next. And it's very exciting, but I was ready to commit to something. So I was like, I'm going to find a year-round job in wine. And that led me to cake bread cellars in Napa. They were hiring a cellar hand, and they were great to me. And I think, they were family run, they're larger, they were a little more corporate, but that came with a lot of benefits as well. And a lot bigger facility, but we would ride bikes between the white and the red facility. And I mainly worked on the red side, but that was great. They really kind of helped me grow. I told them I was interested in working the vineyard, so I got to be like a viticultural assistant for their viticulturalist, and that really started to connect a lot of dots for me. And yeah, that's when it all started making sense. But I did sort of feel like a small cog in a big machine there. And when fruit would come through, it was like I didn't have a whole lot of context for where that fruit was or how it was grown. And so that left me wanting a little bit more. So that's when, right around that time, I'd been there for about a year, and I got a text from a friend who said that Littorai Wines needed a cellar master. And this was 3 weeks before harvest or something like that. And so I did what no one should ever do, and I quit 3 weeks before harvest at Cake Bread, with the idea that I would go and do an internship at Littorai and then hopefully get a cellar master gig. And so I, sabotaged all the other interns that year and took credit for all their hard work and got the job. No, not at all. It was a great team. A few of the winemakers from that vintage are actually up in Oregon now, and that's where I feel like, I didn't study wine, but at Littorai Wines underneath Ted Lemon, that was my education. And that was what really solidified that wine was something that can be powerful, can be interesting, can be this lifelong pursuit that, you're always going to be learning, and you get to, on a smaller scale, you really get to see all the different facets that come together to make a wine. So, yeah.
So before we get to Littorai, I want to talk about your time at Cake Bread a little bit. You mentioned wanting to see the whole process. So tell me about starting to learn the whole process, starting to learn the non-harvest times of the year. What did you learn, and what did you? What made you want to take the next step?
Yeah, there I felt like I was a dull knife when I got there, and then I was a sharpened tool in the cellar by the time I left, because, they stack barrels 6 high, and you're on the forklift a lot, and that you definitely, you lay out barrels, top, sulfur. Once you get through into everything, you're back and you're starting again. And so all of the cycles of like really, tight cellar management and, a little bit of filtering and fining. They weren't that heavy-handed, but learning, how to filter and bentonite and all the different little additions, that all kind of started to click. And then going to the vineyards with this guy, Toby Halkovich, getting that experience was really nice too, because then I got to see how does a vineyard management team, how do you work with a bunch of vineyard management teams and a bunch of crews and talk with growers and give suggestions, make observations, not, overstep, and allow people to cook. And and yeah, just what that whole scene looked like. So they let me outdoors a little bit, which I really appreciated. And yeah, I think I was excited about it, but like I said, I think I wanted to be somewhere that was a little bit smaller, so I could really kind of form a relationship with vineyards, with places, and understand wines more. Yeah.
So at that point, you've been in Napa at a couple different sizes. You've been in New Zealand. You've been in Oregon. Tell me about a little bit comparison, contrast for me at that point. What did you find that had appealed to you the most? What was it you were looking for in the next step?
The next steps were, yeah, I think finding a good mentor. I think I had great mentors, but that's really, I learned a lot, and I felt like my full potential came out when I had people who would push me and who would also take the time to heed my questions and help me out along the learning process. And so I think I learned, a lot from the other interns, in New Zealand. And I learned that there's the type of farming that's being done, the attention that's paid to it, and also the unexplainable wow factor of a vineyard that, can't be quantified. That's important, vineyards aren't going to grow legs and walk around. They're in one place. And so if a place has an amazing view with amazing ecosystem around it like that, there's something that contributes to the wine in that. And so I honestly, after signing into Littorai, I didn't have a full understanding of the expansiveness of the vineyards they work with and the specialness of those sites on the West Sonoma Coast and Anderson Valley. But I was quickly thrown into them, and that everything that I saw being done there just kind of blew my mind a little bit. So, yeah.
So what did you know about Littorai? Why was it so appealing to you?
I think I had, listened and read a little bit about Ted Lemon, his history, and him just being sort of an individual free thinker when it comes to farming, and biodynamics, which I hadn't worked with any biodynamic fruit at that time. I didn't really know what it was, but I was, again, trying to understand more alternative, like old world, old style ways of farming, and that kind of just checked all the boxes. And then when I got there is when I realized the level at which he was operating on the biodynamic front and just all fronts. And so that was, I was like, okay, if I can get a full-time job here, this is going to be where everything kind of comes into play.
So you mentioned that you got there just before harvest. So tell me about that first year there.
Yeah, again, it was wild. It was, Ted is, he's like a chess master, and he really knows how to fully utilize his entire crew, from the vineyard crew to the cellar, to the hospitality staff. And so that meant, like, I learned, okay, we're trucking our own fruit. So rather than relying on vineyard management companies to get your fruit there early, we want to take control of that. And so I was, waking up at 3 a.m. and driving to vineyards in a 24-foot, flatbed truck that we had rented, and heading out to Anderson Valley, and sometimes sleeping in the vineyard the night before with the truck to wake up and truck the fruit back. And that was just, I was like, wow, I'm a part of this process. I am delivering fruit, I'm sorting, I'm in the vineyard, I'm sleeping in the vineyard, and then we're, smelling ferments, tasting ferments, treating things very gently, like totally valuing the whole berries and having a lot of like gentleness and care with the fruit, and being hands-off, native ferments, letting things spontaneously happen and not being dogmatic with our choices, really being responsive to ferments and, having a general treatment of them, but also tasting and adjusting that treatment every single day, and really feeling like welcomed into that process. And when the time was right, having like the opportunity to ask questions and being given really thoughtful answers of why, which having the time, energy, and space to do that during harvest is challenging, and a lot of people don't do it, but that's so important to me. And I think the people who do take that time really reward the employees who are working for them. So, yeah.
What were your initial thoughts on working with biodynamic vineyards?
I was skeptical at first. I was very skeptical. In some ways, it can feel religious, dogmatic, that sort of thing. But once I saw it practically, everything started to click. So everybody wants to focus on lunar cycles, the preparations, but and those are extremely important. But once you go to a place and see a vineyard, a property, a site, being treated in a closed loop system, and on-site compost being made at a really high level, so using pieces of the forest, prunings from the vineyard, hay, all those sort of things, kind of creating this ultra rich compost that then you're replenishing what you're taking out next year. Like that blew my mind. I thought that was just a really beautiful system. That's a central tenet of biodynamics. And then the process of it was great too. Like again, I love the work of wine, and I love the work of biodynamics. Like waking up at 4 a.m. and sprinkling a little bit of quartz crystals into a barrel, and then hanging out with the vineyard crew and stirring it up, and like other people are mixing up, pesticides and herbicides, and here we are working with quartz crystals and spraying that, and getting to go out and walk a vineyard and check in with it, and not just be doing cluster counts or cluster weights, and actually, just going out and spraying biodynamic preps was just a really lovely way to farm, in my opinion. So, yeah. And it grew over time, and I think whoever's doing biodynamics, you have to believe, and you have to want to do it. And I really admired Ted's approach to it, because Ted is a very practical, logical, very intelligent man, and not this woo-woo hippie guy at all. But he's supremely well-read in biodynamics, and really believes that the foundation, the start of it, is the spiritual side, and it all extends from there. And so having someone who, really had thought deeply about these things and why he does it and the importance of it, and being able to challenge him and have him explain his thoughts, like that really helped me get my own grasp around it and kind of come up with my own ways that I think biodynamics works.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
So what happened after the first harvest?
So I was hired on, and at that point, Daniel Estrin was the associate winemaker, who's now at Christum Vineyards. And early on, Ted's a very busy man. He's extremely involved in every aspect of Littorai and the wine business. And so Dan was really my first mentor, and he took me on as his right-hand man, as his cellar master. We were a very close team. We had an amazing vineyard crew who we were deeply close to. There was no barrier between us. They would help us out. We'd help them out. And Pedro Viramontes is the vineyard manager here. He's just incredible. Anyway, Dan and I, Dan was bringing in animals for the first time to Littorai, so we were figuring out how to do livestock integration into the vineyards, and setting up fences, and dealing with cows, breeding cows and sheep, and figuring all that out together while holding down the cellar. So there was never a dull moment. It wasn't like we were just in the cellar. We were very much in the vineyards, and getting to do animal husbandry and seeing that circle of life, slaughtering our cows and sheep, and having big meals with the vineyard crew, and the birth of a cow, seeing that for the first time just blows your mind. And so that working with Dan, he definitely, I was already pretty sharp in the cellar, I think, but he helped help me taste, help me get it in the vineyard more, and then help me understand how livestock works in the vineyard. So that was a lot of the early years, was making the wine, but also getting the livestock program more and more dialed. So, yeah.
What complications does that add?
So many. There's so many benefits, but yeah, there's, there's, electric fences in dry climates. Grounding electric fences is a challenge, and finding the right ones that not only work for sheep but for chickens, and dialing all those sorts of things in, and having a Shetland breed of sheep that's very aware of whether the fence is on or off, and likes to explore and forage different areas, and then learning how, like, seasonally, depending on where you are, grazing year-round without forage is a challenge, and us learning how to do that, not only using the vineyard and pastures, but also how can we graze in the forests, and how can we set up fences in the forests. And they were amazing to be able to really help us with fire mitigation they graze blackberry and poison oak, and opening up the forest and learning how is too much, how much is too little. And then eventually, growing our flock to the point where we were talking with neighbors and getting the sheep into the neighbors' properties. And with that, the 8 p.m. phone calls that the sheep are out and you're finishing up dinner and running back and then chasing sheep around the field and yeah, all that sort of thing. So, yeah, certainly challenges, but never a dull moment, and yeah, a lot of beauty, and the people that you meet through that, like meeting people who shear sheep for a living. Like, in wine, I never thought I would be out there with that guy shearing sheep, which was some of the most special moments, and yeah, that was just more and more little portals opening through being in wine and being at a place that wants to farm sustainably in a thoughtful way. Just more and more doors started opening. So that solidified that if I was going to make wine, that's where I wanted to be.
So let's talk a little bit about that before I'm curious about how your time at Littorai went from there, but tell me about starting to figure out what you wanted to do after all these experiences. Did you start to have an idea of what your kind of long-term goal was?
Certainly. I think, and especially at Littorai, was when my palate started to develop. So, not only is Ted a farmer, but he knows world wine, and he collects world wine. And he was generous with his cellar, and we had lots of blind tastings. And so the 7 years I was there is when my palate really developed, and I really started to understand what wines I liked, what I wanted to make. But it totally just formed this trifecta of, I wanted to be somewhere ideally a little bit smaller and family run. That's adjustable a little bit, but regenerative, sustainable, minimum organic farming, and then hopefully some livestock and that sort of thing integrated as well. So finding those three things proved to be a challenge when I was finally ready to move on. And I took about a year or two to explore places, talk with people, and figure out if I was going to be able to find those three things in unison. Mm-hmm. And then eventually, I wasn't sure it was going to be Oregon. I was, not really totally settled on the place. It had to be California, but I wanted it to involve those three things. And so Antiquum Farm came on my radar. It hadn't been at that point. But once I think I started with a Jancis Robinson article, and there was a great article on what he was doing grazing wise, and that was kind of like light bulb. And I was like, man, I'd love to go there. I'd love to see what he's doing up there. And then I saw the winemaking position had opened up, and so I was like, well, this could be it. This could definitely be it. And then drove up here in the summer or the spring, and came to this cottage. He hosted me and my partner Julia, and spent the weekend with him. And I was like, okay, I think I finally found what's going to be my next step, and it worked out. So yeah.
We're gonna come back to that in a moment. Let's talk about Littorai a little bit more before we do. Tell me about evolution of your role there, and I guess kind of milestones for you there. What were the big takeaways? What were the big things you did there?
Yeah, so started in 2016 as an intern, and then cellar master, assistant winemaker, associate winemaker. And I would say, that place, even walking away, I have the utmost respect for Littorai and what they've done and who they are and what they hold in the highest regard, which is quality, the relationship with their employees and the care for their land, and done at just such a high level. Like, everybody in the wine industry works really, really hard, but the way Ted is able to efficiently divide his time and attention and achieve excellence in all the areas is just, it's really inspiring. And it was just a great place to come into work each morning and have such a motivated, invested person leading the charge that just trickles down. And so over time, what grew for me and what I really loved was I was receiving that mentorship and the ability to be able to pass that down and extend that to interns and people who came on to work for us. So we hired 7 or 8 interns for 100 tons, which is a large group of people for that amount of fruit, but certainly kept them busy. And it was just very important for me. The first year was like, okay, I need to deliver, I need to make the wine, as good as I can. And after that, once I felt like I had that vision of how to do that, it was how can I have the people work beneath me, receive the mentorship that I have, and grow as a people, and walk away like we made some great wine, and I learned a lot, and I've become, hopefully a better person in some way. And so that part was really important to me. We'd keep 1 or 2 on throughout the year, helping out on the farm, allowing people to do projects that interested them, like collecting apples from all the different apple trees and giving apple lessons on the different varieties and an apple tasting during harvest, like really realizing the value of slowing down during harvest and not just trying to get home early, and actually take the time to taste ferments with the folks. And that mentorship, that relationship with the other people was the most important, and the thing that I felt like I really grew at and contributed there. I think most of the people I worked with had a great time there. So.
Talk about your winemaking, I guess, technique, style, whatever you want to call it. How did it grow there, and how, as you were looking for a job, how would you have described your approach to making wine?
Yeah, I think what I learned there was this sort of keeping things on the rail, keeping ferments happy, responding to them, using native yeasts, respecting fruit, and trying to coax out elegance and character from vineyards. And I think what also really clicked with me with the way we were working with wines, and I went down to Burn Cottage in New Zealand, which Ted was a consultant for many years. And I was able to make those wines, and they're made very similarly to Littorai. But if you taste those wines separately, they're completely different. And that for me is like I was seeing site differentiation within the wines at Littorai in a great way. But once I went down there and saw, okay, this is the same thought process applied to New Zealand, and this wine is completely different. So I think what we're doing, the way we're thinking about wines, is translating to terroir-specific Pinot Noir. And so that was an aha moment where those are the wines I wanted to make. I wanted to be hands-off enough to make terroir-specific wines and let the site shine. And to me, that was the most important way I could work as a winemaker. And there's a million different decisions that go into that, but being a little bit more hands-off. Old world style, not trying to get too technologically advanced with it. I think there's people who make great wine that way, but I'm That's not the way I know how to make wine. So just checking in constantly, tasting constantly, and being responsive and not dogmatic or recipe based with my winemaking.
You mentioned earlier, obviously, your excitement and enthusiasm about being in the vineyard and getting to know some of the viticulture side. Tell me about how that grew while you're at Littorai, and about sort of the process for you of getting to know a vineyard and getting to understand what it's going to do in the winery.
Yeah, so we farmed 4 vineyards on the Sonoma coast with our team, and then the rest was a vineyard management company, Pollard Rooney. But yeah, going into the vineyard, actually working 10-hour days, 6 days a week during the summertime, and seeing how much effort is involved, how much care is there, and just the attention to detail that Ted really had to those sites and trying to dry farm them, being meticulous with crop estimation, crop drops, different canopy management, trying to experiment with trellising and how to shade fruit in the afternoon size if the row orientation wasn't quite right, and just never being thinking, okay, that's just okay. Like that vineyard's good. We're just gonna let that one alone. Like constantly trying to tweak, increase the health of the vineyard, and just multiple passes and attention to the site. That all was very motivating. So, yeah.
And you had talked earlier about sort of being able to see the differences in what the wines you produced, even though they're produced in the same style. So tell me a little bit about that, about getting to know what a vineyard was how it was going to taste, how it was going to be.
Yeah, so the portfolio of vineyards, especially in Anderson Valley, was really fascinating. I'd worked with a few Anderson Valley vineyards before, but it's an amazing valley that extends, going north of Russian River Valley. It's really the only continuous valley that extends to the ocean, and it's cut off by this rugged coastal range that separates it from 101. And once you drive an hour through the winding mountains to get there, it opens up, and it's this beautiful valley that feels remote, has this wild character to it. And you have the north and the south ridges in the valley, and it's recognized as being great for sparkling and Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, and it's still kind of being defined as what are the characteristics of the different part of it. And we had 5 or 6 vineyards from the furthest west, the deep end of Anderson Valley, to Boonville, kind of the further east side, and then every different elevation. And so starting to see that the similarities weren't as much kind of how close to the ocean you were, like the way a lot of times we think about it. It was more vertical. It was like the ridgetop vineyards had similarities, the mid-ridge steep slope vineyards have similarities, and then the valley floor all had their kind of similarities. But some 2 of the vineyards were no more than a half a mile away from each other, but one sitting on top of the mountain versus being on the slope, to one, way more tannic structured, different physiology of the clusters, and seeing that you could make 2 wines of Pinot Noir from half a mile away and have them be so different was just, I think it was the proof I needed to see, tasting those wines, that Pinot Noir can be very site specific and express that.
So tell me a little bit about Pinot Noir. Obviously, you've worked quite a bit with it. What's special about it? What's unique about it?
I think it is one of those varieties that really can express place. It's that sweet middle ground of a red wine with complexity, but not so much power. It's more delicate. It ages gracefully. All of those sort of things really spoke to me. And even just dealing with the ferments, like you're punching it down or you're stepping in it, it's not just pump overs, like you're working with it in a very intimate way, which I certainly enjoy. And just coming here to Antiquum Farm, coming here and seeing how different this Pinot Noir is, getting to work with, 11 different sites or whatever at Littorai, and then coming here and like, okay, I just have one to focus on. But it being such a different animal altogether, it was like, you can think you have an understanding of variety, but you go somewhere else and it's apples and oranges. So yeah, I think it's constantly keeps me guessing. Yeah.
You talked about your kind of growth at Littorai up the ladder, and so tell me about sort of learning leadership there and learning to sort of run a team. What were the biggest takeaways for you in terms of
Just working with new people every year, learning people's different learning styles, what their needs are, how certain people want to be pushed and really enjoy that, and then other people need to be listened to, and taking the time to pull people aside and say, hey, what's going on? How are things going? How can things be better? What's on your mind? Like, even it not having some sort of solution to give them, just by them voicing that, I always found went a really long way, and people really responded to that. And so, yeah, a lot of I think I followed Ted's lead in setting an example of integrity and striving for excellence, and then hope that that is contagious. And I think oftentimes that is, if you show up and you're working hard and committed and passionate, then the people around you will. So if you run yourself too far into the ground and that enthusiasm and psych loses, it just permeates through the team. So I think I tried to lead by example as best I could, and I think that resonated with some people. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
So you talked earlier about how you discovered Antiquum and how you first heard about it. So tell me about your first visit here.
Yeah, I think it was March, maybe early April, and the sun was out. It was just beautiful. The animals were grazing and integrated. The dogs came running up to us. And then out comes Steven, this extremely warm, huge man, Viking-looking person, and out of the cottage and boots, and I was like, okay, this feels like Oregon. This feels like it has soul. And yeah, I had learned, that it was the first day of sunshine in like 4 months or something like that. So it was a mint time to visit, and to be sold on Oregon. And yeah, we spent 3 days here, staying in the cottage that we're in here. That learning that the wood was milled on this property and built by Stephen and his father, and just also getting that feeling that this owner of this winery this is their home, and this is what they were born to do, what they want to do. The amount of work is massive, but it's not thought about. It's just implied. And to be, again, to find an owner who was a farmer, first and foremost, and who needed a winemaker who was going to kind of let me do my thing, was like, man, this is a pretty good deal. Like, this is exactly what I was hoping for my next step. So there was a lot of excitement. I went back. We both thought about it for a little while. And then 2 weeks later, I asked Ted, how much time do you need for me to transition out of here? And luckily, Chris Cassell, my cellar master, was ready to step up, and it all just kind of clicked really nicely. And then I was out here in July of 2023. But yeah, I joked that I came up here and was, oh yeah, I was the winemaker down at Littorai, and people being like, that guy's already here. His name's Dan, So I got to come up with a new story. That one's already played out. So
get here in July. So tell me initial priorities when you got here.
We had 2022s in barrel. And so making those blends with Steven was like first thing, and then jumped right into bottling 4,000 or 5,000 cases. Just right off the bat. So that was in a new facility, by myself, it was luckily wineries aren't all that different, and was able to kind of come in seamlessly. And in a facility, we're in a shared space, so there was enough people that I could ask a few questions to get things done. But yeah, I was pretty much hit the floor running and get the 22s in bottled. That shaped up nicely at the end of August. Some repackaging, and then jumping straight into harvest. So it was, the first 6 months were just, real quick. We'll get going. It's a quick harvest. And then finally a deep breath in November. So,
How'd the first harvest go?
it was the most learning I've had for sure in a harvest. It was, I'd say, exceptionally smooth, very fast, and really opened my eyes to how it takes time to understand a site, to figure it out, especially one as unique as this one. And was terrifying, fun, informative, all the things all at once. Not having that safety net of someone with 40 years of winemaking experience next to you. I came in with a lot of confidence and was humbled in some ways, but also very pleased with how it all turned out. Walking into a new place, new vineyard, myself and one intern making the wine, and it overall the wines are in tank, about to be bottled, and I'm happy with those, but really more enthusiastic for the next vintage than ever. Sometimes as winemakers are working in wine, you're sort of like, oh, harvest is coming. I'm like, oh, shucks, we better get some sleep. But here more than ever, I'm genuinely very excited just to have another chance to work with this fruit, and all the things that I learned throughout that harvest, be able to actually come in and have a little bit better idea of how to work with this fruit. So, yeah.
So tell me a little bit about this site. Obviously, you mentioned it's unique. Tell me about getting to know the site here.
So obviously the farming, the animal-based viticulture that we're doing by integrating livestock year-round with the electric fence trellis system that he's pioneered, that has an enormous effect on the way these wines express. Learning the site, learning the chemistry of the site is extremely interesting. You're able to achieve great ripeness and lots of sugar accumulation with very high acidity. And so it's such a great challenge for me, and it excites me because I'm coming from a place where we were able to make fully developed Pinot Noir at 12%, with full flavors, expression, balanced acidity, and then coming here and to make a 12% wine would be very challenging with the acid levels that we have. They would be acid rippers. So trying to find that balance here is so different than the sites that I worked with there, and takes, it really took me to look at these wines differently, not trying to make them just the way that I had learned to make there, and try to understand and respond to the site in different ways that I never experienced down in California. So the wines have expression, they have power, their clonal expression is a lot different than what I saw from clones down in California. And so just really in my face seeing, okay, you can't be just taking a formula from down in California and applying it here. You need to really take notes, get out in the vineyard, understand how these different blocks and different sections of the vineyards are ripening, and then be gentle with the fruit. I think here, even a lighter touch than I was used to, which was hard for me because I was like, well, I'm only going to touch the fermentations once a day. That feels like I'm not doing enough. But there was plenty to do, obviously, the rest of the day. But just being a little bit more reliant on pump overs and a little gentler with extraction, like all those sort of things with the power of this fruit, it really rewards that. So just so fun to come to such a different site. work with some fruit, even though it's the same variety, being Pinot Noir. The Pinot Gris was all new to me. I'd never worked with Pinot Gris. And I was honestly at first more excited about the Pinot Noir to work with, but since working with this Gris, it's got so much more character than I thought Gris could have, and it's one of my favorites that we work with. So, and getting to make skin contact orange Pinot Gris, that was new for me. Trying to figure that game out. Really challenging and exciting. So, yeah.
You talked about kind of being the decision maker, or one of the key decision maker for perhaps the first time. So tell me about that. About making the key decisions you had to make in your first year. What did you learn, and what are the results so far?
Yeah. So first time making picking decisions. So this was a big transition. I felt like I had done all of the other winemaking things or been involved with them more or less, but actually calling picks, I had samples, fruit, taste samples. But that was big. That was for me. And so, we started, sampling every 3 to 5 days, and feeling like I was seeing consistent tracking and all that good stuff. And feeling confident, making the first few white picks, they're coming in right. And then taking samples and seeing jumps that I wasn't used to seeing with the weather that we were having, and understanding that these are shallow bell pine soils, and they're dry farmed, and seeing some jumps and calling, tasting with Steven, and it's like, all right, we're going to pick everything over the next few days, and we're going to get it all in. And some surprises, like I think a lot of people in Oregon maybe saw in 2023, maybe not everybody, but definitely feeling so grateful that he has the gusto and drive and crew to get things off when we need it to. So, I've always wanted to be surfing ahead of the wave and giving growers 3-5 days of a pick, super calm winemaker guy. And then of course my first harvest, we're picking tomorrow, and can we pick this, and this? And we got it in, and luckily, we night pick down here, and so we're getting fruit in early, cold fruit, which I love, and a lot of other people are day picking out here. So we're not only able to get the crew out here, but we're also getting the fruit into the vineyard early, or the winery early, and I'm able to get started, sorting, processing, all that stuff early. Which is definitely a gift. So yeah, it was exciting. It was quick. I think we picked everything in a week towards the end of September, and we'll see what we can do this year to spread that out and to not get any surprises or anything like that. But overall, very, very pleased how everything worked out the first year. So,
what was the biggest humbling moment for you?
I think more so like coming in and having this vision of wanting to find where I felt like the wines wanted to express the site the most, and maybe, picking a little bit earlier, and having confidence that I was going to be able to find this balance of acid, tannin, ripeness, all that sort of thing at a little bit lower level. And then coming in and seeing the way the acid moves in this wine, and the way, the way the ripeness worked out, and how quickly things moved, and, coming in saying, I'm going to, try to restrain these wines a little bit, and then having them just be what they are. And it's easier said than done, and you can't make the same style Pinot Noir everywhere, and just the humbleness of knowing that it's going to take years to find that place, and a deeper understanding of this place, and you can't come in 2 months and just nail it, or at least I can't. So.
Tell me about what you're looking forward to this year. You mentioned obviously second year, first full season here. What is this harvest looking like for you, and what are the biggest sort of steps you're hoping to take?
Yeah, so I am just knowing the site better, getting out here, getting to prune, see the vineyard develop. All the notes I took of what I saw from the fruit coming in, and my cap management, the little things I want to tweak with that. and, dividing up picks a little bit more, kind of just because it's one clone in one block, kind of seeing the differences that I saw from the top of the hill versus the bottom of the hill. Going out here and taking soil samples and seeing actually how shallow some of the soils are in certain areas and how that's going to affect the water availability for some sections, and knowing how that's going to play out. All those sort of just little details that you get from just being here and spending more time here make me excited for this year. So, yeah. Yeah.
Let's talk about the Oregon industry a little bit for a second here, zoom out for a moment. Tell me about your initial impressions of Oregon. I guess going back to even Pinner-Ash and working then, what are your thoughts on the Oregon wine industry? What have they been, and what is the growth you've seen?
Yeah, I think overall, my impression is that quality across the board is just getting better and better. And there's more variety of the different kinds of wines, and the way people are using grape varieties is very exciting. And what I felt more than anything, only being here a year, is a welcoming and an openness of the community. Tasting with a group of local winemakers down here in the more southern end of the Willamette, and sharing their wines, talking about their wines, being open, being vulnerable, figuring things out, is something that I know that's there in California, but I didn't necessarily extend myself into, and really feeling that here and feeling that openness. And there's a camaraderie here of people doing it, and just the amount of people focused on regenerative, sustainable farming here is way more expansive than I knew. So it's really been just a whole new world, and I felt like the Sonoma Coast quite well, and got to meet a lot of the great players down there, and up here it's a whole new cast of characters and vineyard sites and wines, and that's pretty cool. It's like, in a lot of ways starting over again, but with a little bit more in my toolbox.
So on the industry side, what happens next for Oregon? What do you kind of foresee the next few years looking like here?
Boy, I guess I'm still figuring out the state and where it needs to be. I know, down here, Junction City, sort of Eugene area, we're a little more detached from things going up north, which, it takes effort for me to get up there, and people are certainly receptive when I do go up there. But there's a little separation. Like the traffic from Portland doesn't always make it down here, and we have a really solid local base in Eugene base that love this place. But I think, like I said, I think viticulture and people coming and giving new ideas and coming from different places, like there's a lot of attention in Oregon. So I think all of those ideas, finding out which ones are good and which ones are bad, I think there's room for growth, but obviously there's a lot of people who've been doing it for a long time at a high level here too. So yeah.
And what else is next for you? What are you looking ahead to in the future, personally or professionally?
I think just really, like I said, finding where I feel like I can best express Antiquum Farm's, vibe, ecosystem, Pinot Noir, all that. And hopefully, after a few more years, I'll really feel like I have it dialed, even though you never really do. But yeah, my focus is this place, and we made some Chardonnay last year, and we're sourcing a little bit of Chardonnay this year too, so that's kind of fun. New variety for Antiquum. Maybe down the line trying to get some Chardonnay vines. We have one more field that hasn't been planted, so I'm open to things other than Chardonnay, but Chardonnay is fantastic and versatile. Just trying to get even more settled here, I think.
All right. All the questions that I have for you today. Anything I didn't ask that I should have, or anything we didn't cover that you'd like to cover?
No, I think
we covered it.
We did. I
Excellent.
think so.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for sharing your time and story with us, and of course your dog poking head out there, which is very nice. Appreciate you taking the time, and we'll let you off the hook.
Super. Thanks,
Thank
Josh.
you.